Hello, all. This is Earth Sky Woman Tammy Brunk, and I am beaming live to you here in the Montague County, Missouri River watershed in Missouri. And I'm here with the October Astrology Oracle. And I'm live on YouTube. I never do that. So it's funny because it makes everything backwards. So it's a little disconcerting, but that's okay. I just wanted to be a little bit more in real time. Okay, so we have a big month ahead of us, and I wanted to just start before I even move into the specifics with a few messages that just keep coming through that feel really important to presence. And one is just to acknowledge that what's happening in North Carolina. I think probably many of you listeners have people that you love in that area, not just North Carolina, but all the areas impacted by Helene. So sending so much love to those areas, to those communities. And I've been I have to share that even when I speak into that it feels so important to know that in a moment like now where we can feel very overwhelmed by world events, that the invitation is always to return to our own bodies, into our own breath, into our own communities, into our own immediate situation as well, and to know that um, remaining where we are, being rooted in presence where we are, is very important. At the same time, that when we see what's happening to lands and people that we love, it's an invitation to drop more into our hearts and to see where we can offer sustenance or assistance. If that's through monetary means, then there's a lot that's now showing up there that you can give in a lot of good ways, to local organizations or to individual families, or that there are a lot of places where you can find that. And it's really essential, again and again, to focus our attention on what is generative and life-giving in these scenarios. So just know and allow ourselves to feel the grief of what's being lost, and also to focus our attention on all the places where humanity is rising up in those communities um, to help and to support, and that innate aspect of who we are is showing up. So focus your attention on that. Focus your attention on that way that we as humanity, as humans, as the human species, have that built into our DNA. It's who we are. So build that narrative about us being loving, generous beings, and see the human species in that way, and feed that reality, and feed that with our actions, with the ways that we speak to each other and about each other. That feels just really important in this moment. So just sending all kinds of love, and also to everyone out there, to know that if you're seeing a lot of people who are going through a lot out there and you are not, then there's a reason for that. There's a reason for you being in a rooted place where you can ground the medicine and the frequency, and you can offer something from a place that's really rooted. So just trust that, know that is important, that from where you are, to be grateful and honor the fact that you have more calm or more peacefulness, and let that be a point of gravity where you can offer what you have available to offer. Um, the other message that keeps coming through that I find, I was just speaking to a woman actually who was in Georgia, a client who, beautiful soul. She was in Georgia, and she was literally in her bathroom of the hotel where she had just gotten a room. And it was after the chemical spill in Georgia. And so we had a whole conversation, and what I kept feeling and seeing and saying to her that just felt so essential, that kept coming through, was to remember all the training that she had been going through to prepare for that moment, and that's why she was ready. And then to look back and say, okay, who was I a year ago? How might I have been able to address this situation at that time? And she was just brilliant. She was incredible in her presence in that moment, when I was speaking to her. And I find myself saying that to people a lot, that as we continue to move through this threshold of this hospicing of this old age and this movement and birthing, midwifing into this new era that um and the kinds of things that people are facing. When I ask, think about yourself a year ago, and whether that has to do with relationship dynamics or more external issues, really think about who you are now and who you were then. And so the theme I keep hearing is see how much stronger you are now. See how much more um, open-hearted you are. See how many places where you would have had so many edges and so much rawness in working through an old issue that just kept coming up and kept coming up. And now you have more generosity of spirit. Now you have more spaciousness. Now you have more capacity to hold what's there. So it feels really important to me right now to mention that because I think we are all growing so quickly and our world is changing so fast that there is this feeling we can have that we're not keeping up or comparing ourselves. This is real, the level to which we are bombarded with information, and my sense is to continue to be very aware of how much you're ingesting, because it is very much impacting our ability to be rooted and grounded where we are. I say that as a person who has a Gemini moon, who is, I see myself being very attracted to taking in more information, even as I try to be very diligent about it. So I get it. And it's not a good bad thing, but it is something that has an impact, on our capacity to root and ground and to be present. So that all feels like important to share. And then the other piece is that we're going through another massive geomagnetic storm, and that has an effect on us as electromagnetic beings. So we do have the experience in our physical bodies, our biology, of being impacted when we have the biggest solar flare since 2017 is what they were saying from yesterday. And so what that also has to do with is the need to really deeply root and ground, and to drink plenty of water. And I think the other piece that I know I have been working on personally, and I think all of us are, is again, as when we're looking at what's happening in Asheville, or when we're working with individuals and groups and seeing what's happening in the world in general, how can we presence and focus on seeing the group that's impacted, seeing the land that's impacted, and really seeing the strength in them? How can we really not go into this mode of seeing them as hapless victims? I say that because I'm very aware that there are situations in our world now where there is a massive imbalance of those who have the power and those who have financial and military power, economic power versus those who do not. But I think it's very important to remember that true power isn't that. I think we're seeing that in Gaza. I think we're seeing that with the spirits of the people there. And that does not mean that it's not for us to play a role with our prayers, with our funding, with the focus of how we pour in resource and attention and raise awareness, to shift and change the power dynamics, because that is, of course, important. But I actually think the first step is to not allow ourselves to caricaturize individuals or situations to imagine that they are powerless. Because oftentimes, what's happening at the level of soul or spirit for those individuals or communities that are going through tremendous upheaval and change is that they are being built at the soul level in a very potent way. Now, I am not saying that to in any way, shape, or form say that it's all right. Um, what our current modern civilization is doing to our planet or to the biosphere, or and all that we are doing in those arenas. I'm not saying that that's wonderful and good, but what I am saying is that our point of focus and our point of attention more and more and more is needing to be towards, um, how do I be with this scenario? And I feel it, yes, and I allow my heart to break, yes, and I allow myself to be broken open, and allow myself to be connecting on the level that helps me remain in my human, helps me remain in my heart. And at the same time, how do I learn to do that and also um, be awake and present in the moment to what needs tending that's in our field? And for some of us, what's in our field is more in the physical, material, immediate local environment. I mean, for all of us, we need to tend to that. And for some of us, there is more of a global focus. So that's okay. That's good to have that diversity because we remain a global community and we do live in a moment where there is this gift that is multifaceted. It's a gift and it's also, of course, a challenge that we can communicate with each other in this way. So long as we have this, then to use it to create good medicine. So, okay, I'm just gonna complete with that kind of opening, and then I just want to step into a little bit of speaking into the month itself of October. So in the month of October, we're still really feeling the eclipse energies, right? So we have that eclipse, the annular eclipse on Wednesday in Libra. And so that moved us out of the eclipse window, the eclipse portal. Of course, our systems are still kind of adjusting, especially with the geomagnetic storms. So the themes that arose through the time of the eclipse, we're still kind of uh, we're still exploring and allowing in our systems to come fully into coherence everything that was coming through. So I want to look actually at a excuse me. I'm going to look really quick at I'm going to make a chart for this moment I'm speaking actually, or actually no, it's going to be um I am going to look at the moment of the Venus conjunction because that's the big activation today. It's part of why I waited till today to do this. And that is at 10:28 a.m. It happened. That's so funny. So 10:28 a.m. Is when Venus um and the moon came together. And so if any of you who have followed my work, you would know that I do a lot of work with Venus. And so I'm looking at this right now. I just want to presence that she is in the field. And because she's kind of what's up today. And so I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen to give us kind of a beginning point for the month and let her kind of tell her story a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to see how I can see. I never use YouTube like this, so this is going to be interesting. To see how I can share. So thank you all for being patient with me. It's just this is an experiment a little bit. And so okay, interesting. Okay, here it is. All right, I'm going to share this. So this is a great experiment. Okay, so um Venus evening star this morning, or this morning, just about just a few minutes ago, was conjunct Venus. So you can see 10:28. Okay, this is when they were. So this is at 10:28. All right, that was about an hour ago, actually. So, but basically, so Venus and the Moon are together. They will have been together at 15 degrees Scorpio. And that is a really important point where they're coming together because that is the point of Samhain. And that is also it is also aligned to the two stars in the Scales constellation, Zubin al-Janubi and Zubin al-Shamali. And so those two stars have to do with the scales of Ma'at. And so we're going to talk about that in a moment. I just want to present some of what's alive here on the chart before I kind of close it and start to talk a little bit about what's going on, what's alive right now in the field. Okay, that opens our month. We also have Black Moon Lilith and Juno together in Libra. It's a very interesting pairing with Mercury and with the sun very close by, and still with Astraea traveling with the sun, and all of that activating the south node. So I wanted to just presence where everything's at as I'm speaking, and then it's going to move, over the course of the month. But let's start with where we are. And Jupiter is about ready to um, station retrograde, and Pluto is about to station direct. Though that's two of the big kind of back and forth movements that we have this month. Um, and Uranus is still because it's close to 26 Taurus. Uranus remains very close to the star Algol in the forehead of Medusa. So there's a lot of that energy that we're tapping into right now. And I want to see if there's anything else that's very significant that we want to look at. Well, I mean, a big one is that Chiron is going through some big activations, and we're going to have Mars square Chiron over the course of the month. We're going to have the Sun square Mars. We're going to have Pluto opposite Mars in not too long, not this month, but soon in November. And then we're going to have Chiron opposite the Sun as well. I'm sorry, that's going to be a little later in the month. Yeah, it's going to be opposite as well. And then we're going to also have the sun by the end of the Libra season. It's going to be squaring Pluto. So a lot's being activated. I just wanted you to be able to kind of see that visually. Not that all of you watching are going to understand astrology, but to speak into some of the themes. And then also just Mars in general is a big player this month, partly because of the squares with Chiron and with the sun, but also because of the sign it's in. And I'm going to talk a little more about that. Okay, I'm going to close that now, but I just kind of wanted to give you a little visual. And let's stop sharing. Hopefully, let's see if I'm sharing that or not. No, cancel. Okay, hopefully you can see me now and not the shared screen. Okay, so again, I never do YouTube Live, so please forgive if it's a little bit funny. All right, so just beginning then with what is in the fields, and we have again with Venus. I want to speak in a little bit into Venus and what she's up to right now, because she is really strongly featured here. Again, she was with the moon just a few minutes ago. So with Venus, she's in the evening star phase right now. And so, as an expression of the feminine divine, or more and more, I actually see her in a way as the sacred human. And I'll explain why I think of that. Um, in many spiritual traditions, they actually see Venus as connected to what it means to be an incarnate human. In some traditions they would say morning star is Christ, for example, and the path that Jesus takes to go down to incarnate and then to resurrect. So there is this energy around Venus and what she does in the sky that's a really precise, beautiful procedure that helps us understand what it means to be a human being, enlivened with soul. And so in Venus's journey, when she's in the morning star phase, then we collectively are in a phase of releasing, of clearing. It's like we're clearing all of our energy centers as a human species. We're letting go, we're letting go, we're letting go. And then there's a period where Venus is behind the sun, and that's a period where as a humanity, we are really in a deep process, a very mysterious process, where we're in the heart of great mystery, and we are going through this great kind of inner restructuring. It's like being in the chrysalis. And then when Venus evening star appears, so she comes out from behind the sun, she's very faint, she's very dim, and then we begin to see her as a faint little light in the evening sky after sunset. And she's gone through this massive initiation, and we have too. So we've been kind of in the dark, and then she starts to rise brighter and brighter and higher in the evening sky. And so for about 8 months, she's visible in the evening sky. And that's where she is right now. She's in the evening sky. She's really beautiful. If you go out after sunset, I'm sure many of you have seen her. And if you go out tonight, you're going to see her with the crescent moon. And so the way I work with the Venus cycle, is to work with the Venus Inanna mysteries. And Inanna, literally, she's the goddess at the very root of modern Western civilization. So I think she has a lot to say to us about what our current predicament is as a species. And her descent story, the story of her descent into the underworld, is also tells us a lot about what we're experiencing personally right now. So Inanna was the great goddess of heaven and earth, and in the ancient Sumerian stories, and the first tablets that were discovered in modern day Iraq that told her story described her descent going through seven gates, removing her seven powers at each of the seven gates. And then when she gets into the underworld, she meets her sister, the dark goddess Aresh Kagal. She goes through a death portal, and then she is reborn. And then she once again emerges from this descent, an initiated goddess, and she goes through seven gates, reclaiming each of her vestments at each of those gates. So she's reclaiming, rebuilding, regaining power as an initiated goddess. So the way I've come to see this and feel this more and more is that it really does have to do with the journey of the spirit or the soul into the human body. And it really does have to do with the way that we currently, and it's actually a really important story for our time, because it's also describing the way that we her stories were told of 5,000 years ago, or rather I should say her stories were recorded on tablets about 5,500 years ago, at another turning of an age. And at that time, we were shifting from the age of Taurus, which was a more goddess oriented society, into the age of Aries, which was more masculine oriented. And many would actually say we're beginning to recognize that it may be that during the more matriarchal era, that there was an imbalance. By the time of Inanna's descent journey, there had been an imbalance at that stage where the pendulum had swung very far over into the direction of a focus on the feminine at the expense of the masculine principle. So, there are many ways of looking at this, but that is one version of the story, that we tend to go to extremes and then we have to come back. So, in that extremity, then Inanna, the goddess, and I think sometimes we need to take good, bad labels off of this. But my sense more and more is that it's actually a larger cycle that we don't fully understand. So the goddess was going into the underworld to do her deeper work. She was, you could say, going on retreat, or she was going into the death chamber, the death birth chamber, to for a period of time, because that's how the cycles work. And so for the last 5,500 years, the goddess has been doing her deeper work, and the masculine has been, in a sense, holding the world on his shoulders. You could say, and I see that so much right now with the women that I work with, who um, their male partners are often doing, really getting burnt out. The way that our current economy is wired, especially here in the West, um, it's not sustainable. And so there are many women who are just basically saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not operating from that old paradigm. And yet their partners are still often kind of locked into those systems, and of course supporting the family. So that's part of what I've been seeing. And so in any case, when we look at the Inanna mysteries, we one of the ways to see that is to work with the evening star phase as a time where we are collectively, as a humanity, um, the goddess is reemerging into our world to balance the masculine principle. And we see and feel that in so many ways right now. And one of the ways, as I was working with the Venus cycle last year, really deeply and in a really deep inquiry of who is the feminine, how are you showing up for us now? What is your living, who are you at this present moment? And what I kept seeing coming through really was the mother goddess. I kept seeing Mary, I kept seeing Our Lady. And when I say the mother goddess, I think basically that Mother Mary, or Our Lady, in the many ways that she shows up as an apparition, that she is within at least the Christian tradition, and even branching out beyond that, she is one of the ways that the goddess has remained alive, really, even through these last many thousands of years. And so she often shows up in times and in places where people are about to go through massive upheaval and changes, and so she's been showing up. So I see, her example and the way that she's been showing up. Uh, for example, with a couple in St. Louis, I've talked about this a few times, but I think these things are happening in all of our backyards. So I mentioned what's happening in St. Louis, and I suspect it's happening near you as well. Something like it, where there is a couple who are just these very kind, very spiritual, but very rooted and grounded community members. And the man starts having these visions of Our Lady of Light, is what they call her, and she essentially um, was urging them to build a sanctuary. And for any of you who live in Europe and who have know anything about the many apparitions of Mary, this isn't a new idea. But in any case, so they built a sanctuary and they found the land just south of St. Louis in this really beautiful wooded kind of magical area that they would never have known of otherwise. And it was all along the Merrimack River. And so she calls it the Merrimack, right? So when you sit and talk to Meg or Mark Barry, who have founded the sanctuary, they were given the visions in 2017, and then by 2020 they had built the sanctuary, and the directives were really clear. It's like, this is a sanctuary for anyone and everyone who wants to come and needs a space to be nurtured, to be held, and people can come and give workshops, but there's no money exchange. There's no so this is a very open space. And Mary would call the people who came. She said, "Don't advertise. The people will just come." And she calls them her little roses. And so there's this sanctuary that's built, and there's so many aspects of what happened that I think are really instructive for us right now. One is that we are seeing these sanctuaries right now that are being created where people are welcomed whether or not they have financial resource. Now, I'm not, and this is just part of the bridge from this moneyed economy to a different way of operating in the world. Um, and if you talk to Meg, like I sat with her and talked to her for many hours. It was funny because she said, I didn't, we didn't have the money. We didn't know how it was going to work. And it just came. And you often hear those kinds of stories that and I think that's really instructive for many of you out there who are visionaries who want to create something. I'm telling myself the same thing, that if we stay really rooted in what our vision is, the money is not an issue. It's more about staying rooted in our vision and courageous and stepping into that. And today, the Venus moon activation is activating the solar plexus chakra. And when I say that, what I mean is that, as I'd mentioned before, the Venus has a very elegant cycle where in the morning star phase, she is going through 7 or 8 gates. She meets the moon 7 to 8 times. And so that's when the goddess is removing each of her 7 powers. And that corresponds to the 7 energy centers of the body, from the crown to the root. She goes through this whole purification process on the other side of the sun. So then in the evening sky, when she rises, once again, she is with the moon in the evening sky every month, about 7 to 8 times. So this is when she's reclaiming her strength at each of these energy centers. So first there's a purification. This is an alchemical procedure, right? This is what we each go through as individual and collective humanity. So by the time she gets to the solar plexus chakra, which is literally about half an hour ago, the new energy that's coming through is an invitation. I'll say the invitation over the course of the month, because it sets the tone for the month. It's where the goddess is like, here is the focus for the month. Is number one, it's your solar plexus. So it's to find your inner light and it's to shine that. Solar plexus has to do with action, taking action. Solar plexus has to do with being in your I am essence. So being who you are without apology. So we've already had activated over the last couple of months the root and the sacral. And now the theme for the month is solar plexus. And interestingly, like I'd mentioned before, this is where Venus and the moon are in the sign of Scorpio. So Scorpio is one of those signs, and I think all of the astrological signs we're needing to really revision and see them in a new way. We're needing to have a conversation with these archetypes of the human, that where we just really are dropping and letting go of the old distortions, and we're allowing this new emergent expression of that sign to emerge. And so with Scorpio, I'll just share a brief story from Ireland because I got to experience this firsthand, how the new Scorpio feels. We, as a group, had gone to a place called Rosnaree on the night of the first quarter uh, moon in Scorpio when they had come together, and this is exactly conjunct my Mars. So I'm going to feel that intensely because it's a personal activation, right? So whatever's happening in the sky, if it's really activating your personal chart, you're going to really tune into it. So I was very curious that day about what was going to happen because I'm like, okay, I'm in Ireland. The whole intent of this journey is to open into what the new potential paradigms are and really step into that field of what's already present, you could say, in the fifth dimensional reality where the earth already is, which is a zone of greater congruency, coherence, and love. When I step into that reality, I get to sense into the true essence of each of these astrological signs instead of the distortions or the misunderstandings or the history. So Scorpio is often seen as this, you know, Scorpio has to do with the realm of shadow, has to do with working through it has to do with these death rebirth processes. If you think about Day of the Dead or Halloween or All Saints Day, that carries the energy of Samhain, which is a Scorpio kind of energy in our current time, right? So think about it seasonally. So those of you who really work with the natural cycles and seasons, you'll already know that the energy of Scorpio or of Samhain it's pure magic, that there is this aliveness to it that we get to tune into that is absolutely sacred. It's a holy day. And so we're learning in the season of Scorpio to tune into what is rich and deep and loamy. And so that, oftentimes we're afraid of what we don't know. We're afraid of what's in the dark. We live in a culture that's afraid of shadow. And but if we really drop into more of the medicine of the void, more of the medicine of the dark, rich, loamy soil, the darkness of the womb. That is the medicine of Scorpio. Even though Cancer historically has been associated with the womb, Scorpio has to do literally with the womb of, I'm going to say it's going to sound intense, but the womb of death. It's the death portal. And that's the moment we're in. We're in a death and a birth portal, right? But Samhain is the part that helps us. And the Scorpio medicine is the part that helps us to tune into the the life within the death process. Tune into the aliveness that comes through when we're willing to let go of what must be let go. And so what I was feeling when we were in Rosnaree, I remember I went basically that spot is it's very significant in the myths of ancient Ireland. And from this really ancient homestead, and the woman who her name was Aisling, who has taken care of this land and this ancient um really it's like a what is the word for it? It's a I mean it's almost like a castle. It's a huge place, but she's cared for with her son and her children, and she married into the family that has been caring for this land for many generations. There's literally a burial on one side of the house where one of the high kings of Ireland was buried. Many of the stories of the original peoples of Ireland, including stories of the sacred salmon, uh, originate in the river Boine. That is, it's there's the bend in the river is right in front of the house, and from the home you can look across and see Newgrange, and you'll know that Noath and Doath are on either side. So you can literally see three of the main megalithic monuments in Ireland, and so we got to be there. It was an incredible privilege to be there because you could feel that this is the place where the original essence of Ireland, of this land, of the stories, of the people, that's where it was. And so I was able to go with a couple of other women to this little trail on the side of the house that took us down to the river. And along this trail, you could see these gorgeous ancient yew trees and all of these other enormous trees. And it was a very dark trail. In fact, there were only a couple of us who ended up finding the trail because when you go down the trail, it's almost completely dark. There's almost no light there. But it's much like you would find when you go to the redwood forest or a place like that in an old growth, that it's very dark, but there there was an underlying sense of love, of potent, powerful love. And I don't want to say friendliness, because there's also an energy there that needs respect. Um, but that was the night of the Scorpio full moon, and what we all felt as a group, we all remarked on it a lot later, was this tremendous, it was this sense of being fully alive, of feeling filled with gratitude for the potency of the magic of that land, and you could just feel the fairies, you could feel the fae on that land in a way that I don't think I've ever felt before, and there was something of a deep stillness that was also present there. So, with Venus activating the solar plexus chakra this month in the sign of Scorpio, this is a month to come alive. This is a month to allow yourself to take action from the deepest aspects of your being, from the deepest desire that takes you beyond yourself into something larger. I'll also share that this moment where Venus and the moon come together, it's filled with many layers of symbolism. That and the other is, as I'd mentioned before, that it's also with the stars of the Scales constellation. So I'm going to share one more story that adds another layer to the wisdom that we get to tune into this month. And that is the story of Ma'at, who is an ancient Egyptian goddess. But before she was a goddess, she was a pure principle of creation. And the principle that she represents is the principle of the way that life organizes order from chaos at the beginning of a new cycle. And this is what's happening right now. It doesn't feel that way often, but this is what the larger creation is tending to and cultivating all around us and within us right now. And so we, with the story of Ma'at, at the point in the Egyptian pantheon where she was known as a goddess, there are stories that she was the one, when we die, who presided over a very interesting and mysterious process, which is the weighing of the heart. And so in these stories, when we die, our heart is weighed against Ma'at's ostrich plume, her feather, Ma'at's feather. And when the heart is measured, what you're hoping for is that your heart is as light as a feather. And if your heart is as light as a feather, then you get to go to the good place. If it's not, you're going to have to, maybe be reborn again and go through some more tribulations, whatever, however it is, that there's more work to be done, shall we say. So I love that story because, having come from a very kind of Calvinist, I shouldn't say Calvinist, but I was born in a primitive Baptist faith, which is rooted in a similar religiosity to the early Protestants, the Calvinists, and it's very serious, and it's very lately I've been, I want to bless my ancestors because they worked so hard and they gave me so much, and I love them and I deeply reverence who they were and what they've done. So I want to honor them with my words. So, with all the gifts and beauty from my ancestors, there is a big thread in my ancestry of um, just of a lot of ancestral heaviness. Many of us carry this, and so I think at certain points in my growing up, I took on the belief that for some reason that it was noble or beneficial to be heavy. And recently I had a friend who said it very well. She said, sometimes spiritual women confuse groundedness with heaviness, and those are two different things. And so I think often we, in this moment we live in, we can get really heavy with taking in too much information or feeling helpless about being able to support in whatever is happening around the world or just with our own lives and the complexities and layers of that. However, when we can allow ourselves to be tended in some way, and I feel like this can be a good conversation with a friend. It can be taking a walk in nature. It can be taking a bath. It can be reaching out when we need support and getting that support. That there's something about presencing and allowing our hearts to be lightened, that we're really being invited into a moment of, and it could be strong feeling. It could be a good cry. It could be prayer. I more and more I absolutely feel that the power of prayer is absolutely essential, and maybe that's because of my ancestral lineage. But to me, I feel like the capacity to offer prayer, to offer gratitude, to step into and steep in that sensation and that state of being is medicine that many of us are needing to remember. So when we go into prayer and when we offer up what is too heavy for us to carry, and so we can offer that to our ancestors, we can offer that to Creator, we can offer that to the earth herself, because she can take that and use that as fuel. That's a good practice. We can't carry all of it. So so this can be a practice for you to ask, how is your heart today? And just tune in right now. How is your heart? And if your heart's very heavy, then can you take a moment, just even you can even imagine physically like saying, okay, what am I carrying that's too heavy for me? And can I make an offering and say, beloved earth, can you please hold this for me? Can you make this into fuel and food? Because I think we also need to remember how to ask for help. And especially of many of the people I see who are carrying so much, to remember how to ask for help. So if you're one of those people, remember that whatever it takes to help you to lighten that load in your heart is very important as well to everyone around you. So this is a very powerful moment with this Venus moon activation. And that's one of the big energies that is carrying us through this month. Another is Mars in Cancer, and it's squaring Chiron. It's going to be squaring the sun. So the Mars in Cancer aspect that's very alive this month is important because Mars is ending a Gemini cycle, and it's soon going to be beginning by the end of January a new 2-year cycle in Cancer. So we're going to see Mars in the sign of Cancer for much longer than any other sign. And then what's really beautiful to consider about this is that in the shamanic astrology paradigm I was trained in, one of the beautiful things that we were taught that I really cherish is this idea that there is the full spectrum feminine and the full spectrum masculine. And a lot of the healing that's needed in our world right now is to deeply honor and cherish every place around the wheel for the authentic masculine and feminine archetypes. And so, what I mean by that is that what's happened and what happens over time, I think this happens within each of us, especially if we're too wired around trauma, um, and we haven't been provided the containment to really heal and come into a regulated nervous system and co-regulate with others and with the earth, is because there is that thread still of being a traumatized species. I actually think that's a lot of what we've been experiencing. There has been an overemphasis on certain archetypes for the masculine, where the masculine has to hold everything together. And I mean that in men, very much in people with male bodies. And I also mean it, for example, with single mothers or others who have to carry both the masculine and the feminine principle in their reality, or people of color, communities of color. Like there is the need to focus on survival. And so there are certain masculine qualities that have been cultivated, sometimes at the expense of others. So there's a version of the Aries archetype, the warrior, who's just going to go in and just get it done. Just no matter what, you're going to make it happen. My mom has an Aries moon. She does this. She's just always like 1000% like moving forward, making things happen, like busting through barriers. So that's an Aries archetype of that, really strong warrior, protector, guardian, and makes things happen. And it's a beautiful archetype. But it's sometimes it gets overused. It's always operating when it's wounded, it's always operating from fight or flight or hypervigilance. And it's always about the energy of survival. Capricorn is another one. Capricorn is the provider. Capricorn is the wise elder. Capricorn is the patriarch in this system that we're coming out of. And so Capricorn for men is the one who is so focused on caring for his family, caring for his community, caring for his corporation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that there's nothing left for him. That he is, again, one of these patriarchs. And so a lot of distortions can come from that. When you're supposed to hold the whole world on your shoulders, um, there are a lot of distortions that come from that we see all around us. So that's just a couple of examples. So the good provider, and then um, The warrior archetype, those are two archetypes for the masculine that we, over the last several hundred years, for example, really see in a positive light. But the reality is that and we see that as masculine, right? And then there are others as well, like the king, for example, like you're the all powerful one, you're the alpha male. We give a lot of props to that person, whether or not it's a healthy expression, honestly. That's changing. So what's left out of that equation is that there are 12 authentic archetypes of the masculine and many subtle differences, many other ways of looking at the masculine, but there's 12 um, core aspects of the masculine. And again, this is beyond gender, right? If you're queer, if you're non-binary, often you're a person who has more well developed than most masculine and feminine. But I'm talking about authentic masculine expression of each of the archetypes. So some of the ones that have not been deeply nourished and not been held in great esteem or seen as authentically masculine are, for example, Cancer. So Cancer is one of those. Cancer is the nurturing masculine, and it's authentically masculine to be a nurturer. You see that sometimes in other cultures. When I went to Palestine many years ago, it's like men are walking around and they're holding each other's hands. They're just very nurturing with each other. Yeah, when I went to Ireland, I saw that so much with men that they were so nurturing with their children. They were so just like very, very affectionate, very nourishing. You see that in many cultures, but in modern society, for many men, they don't, if they're busy being the Aries or the Capricorn, they might have a Cancer Mars, but they don't have the capacity or the space that's given to them to really drop into their nurturing capacities. I have a nephew who's beautiful Cancer Mars, and you just see it, he shines in the way that he cares for his children. I was sitting with him the other day and we were at this family gathering in a really big Airbnb, and his kids were on either side of the house and one was up on a big patio. And as we were talking, I was talking to him about Ireland, and at one point he could just see it. His whole field was just open to make sure he was tuning into exactly where his kids were. Now, I've seen women do this often. I've seen mothers do this all the time, but it's really beautiful when you see a man who's that tuned into his children. He's deeply attuned. So the Cancer masculine archetype is what is on the world stage right now. That is what we are. We are really that he is who is showing up, who is going to support us in this threshold of change as we move into the month. So let's honor the nurturing masculine. It's going to be square Chiron. So let's also acknowledge and that many of the men who are the deepest nurturers of community, of family, all Cancer Mars men are not fathers. Some are deeply rooted in the community and nourishing the community in ways that are often invisible, that no one sees. So there is a wound at the heart of the nourishing masculine, and often it's that he's not fully acknowledged or not fully honored. So my computer is going to die here in a second. So I'm gonna complete here in a moment, but I wanna honor something that my niece, who has a tremendous amount of Cancer energy herself personally, had brought up to me, in response to the eclipse video that I had made recently, because I think it was very interesting. So I had been speaking into the Lilith mysteries. I was talking about Black Moon Lilith, who was with the sun at the eclipse, um, and as I was speaking into it, I was speaking into the aspect of Lilith, who was Adam's first wife, and then according to the stories we know, she he wanted her to because they were made of the same stuff, right? She wasn't from his rib, and so he wanted her to bow to him, to be subservient to him. That's the way many of us have heard the story. So funny because so often with the stories of the goddess, I'll always say that's not the true story. Maybe that wasn't the true story. Maybe we don't know the true story. In any case, and the way I was telling it, she was the one who said, "No, I'm not gonna submit to you," and so she went out into the wilderness, and then she was demonized, right? So, there is an aspect of that story we know is true. However, there's another layer of the story that Tara was bringing up for me because I was talking about Pallas Athena, I was talking about, Sekhmet, how in those stories, they come from the head of the masculine, and I was seeing that as a negative thing, and Tara was like, "Well, what if" my niece, hi, Tara. What if that is also honoring an aspect of the masculine who can give birth? What if that's honoring the nurturing masculine? So what if we need to actually honor that? So I was taken aback and I was just like arguing and I'm like, no, it's like Lilith is, and I was very attached to my way of thinking about it. But it's really stuck with me. When she brought that up, I was like, well, yeah, one thing I know for sure in this moment is that we're needing to really let go of and release our old, if we're going to find peace, somebody has to be the first one to say, I'm not going to carry that grudge. I'm going to put down my weapons. Again, I talk about the Haudenosaunee. They, they, when they came together with the great law of peace, they also buried the hatchet. They buried all of their weapons in the river beneath the great world tree, the tree of life, the white pine tree, which is like the pine tree ahead of me. So there's something about all of us. And this is also bringing it to the story of Sekhmet, that I have a lot of women in my life who are oracles and seers. And one in particular, Catherine Ravenwood, as a priestess of Sekhmet. And when I asked her to dream with Sekhmet at the beginning of this Venus cycle, because Sekhmet is guiding us as one of many deities guiding us through the cycle, I asked her to dream with Sekhmet and bring back a vision for us. And she did. And in the vision, Sekhmet, who is known sometimes to be the one who devours what is out of balance and known for her fierceness, Sekhmet suggested in this vision, she said, have you ever considered retracting your claws? And she said this in response to, in this vision, this friend who saw herself as this battle-weary woman who was carrying these weapons, and she was exhausted from war, as we all are. And Sekhmet herself, who has the greatest fierceness and the greatest love, is a great mother, is one of the expressions of the mother goddess. She said, she said, you could retract your claws. So my sense is that this is the challenging but necessary work, is to lay down resentment and bitterness. And this is what we're being asked to do as men and women towards each other, as any of the as in all the other ways we're divided from one another. We are really being asked to do the work of laying down the resentment so that we can actually come together and create something beautiful. Doesn't mean that there won't be reconciliation work to do, but there's something necessary about being willing to tell a new story and being willing to see the old story in a light of compassion and forgiveness. So as a woman, that's, I think, where my work is happening. Um, and so I just want to maybe end there, because I think I will do other individual videos on other events, but that feels like the most important thing to share around the October energy update. So much love. And may you have just a beautiful, beautiful month. And you'll see me again with more detailed information. All right.